Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, a very special preview show here as we only have 4 teams left. 2 games remain. 2 games are all that stand in the way from us realizing who is going to play for the Super Bowl this season. We're going to break down both the AFC and the NFC Championship game here and also do a little bit of a coaching carousel update because we have some new hires this week that we need to talk to, and Carmen actually spoke to one of those new head coaches, and so we're gonna get her perspective on it here at the top of the show. Carmen, how you doing?
I'm great. If all of that wasn't enough, I think I mentioned this on the show last week. We got the dog that we were hoping to get, so now I'm about
we
to
love to hear it.
Proud dog mom of Mozzarella Stick. You heard it here first. His name is Mozzarella Stick, and we're going to call him Mozzie, and he's a German Shepherd mix that we don't know exactly what he is because the poor little thing was found wandering around South Central LA by himself. So we're going to take him in, and we're going to spoil the ever-loving you-know-what out of him. I cannot wait.
Any dog parents out there knows lamb chop toys. As long as they don't, you got to figure out if, Motzi is going to tear up the toys. So you got to figure out that first. But
right.
I feel like other dog parents out there can relate to what I'm about to tell you. The lamb chop toys. I don't know what they're putting in these things. They're about as addictive as they come for dog toys because my dog has basically every single size of them, and he can't get enough of that lamb chop toy. So I just wanted, from one now dog parent to another, wanted to give you that friendly advice there. Hey, you had just talked to Chicago Bears' new head coach, Ben Johnson, somebody who's been on the coaching carousel block, one of the preferred head coaches for it feels like the last 3 years now, finally landing in a spot, getting a head coaching headset, committing to the Chicago Bears. I want to ask you all about that. But before I do that, the New Year's, guys, it's a great time to reevaluate the financial goals, not just for yourself, but also for your kids. Now's the perfect time to take that time aside to make sure your kids are on a path towards a solid financial future. A kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life is a quick and simple way to set that up, and it lets you invest in their future right now for education, big milestones, so much more. Fabric by Gerber Life. It was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you guys can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives those investments much more time to grow. The whole thing is online, very easy to set up, could take you as little as 5 minutes, and then you just manage your child's account and monitor those investments right from your phone. It can be used on anything. When they're a kid, summer classes, after school activities, whatever it is. And then maybe when they're more adults, if you still have the account there for them, first car, first house, starting a business, traveling, whatever it is that you want to help them out with, you can do that with a kids investment account. Join thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That is meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, so Ben Johnson, now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Chicago fans have needed it. I think they needed it. I understand. Like, the Caleb Williams, they're flying high. They got their franchise quarterback, but still, it feels like since then, things have not gotten off to the right start with that Caleb Williams investment. Now they get the prize of any potential head coach in Ben Johnson. So talk to us kind of about how we got here and just the vibes with the Chicago fan base, how they're feeling. And then you got to talk to Ben Johnson as well. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, this is it's a good day in Chicago, and that's what kept being reiterated by both Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, the team president. We heard from George McCaskey as well, who got up and spoke and talked about how good of a feeling it is to have gotten Ben Johnson. From everything that Ryan Poles said, he was really their top target. Ben Johnson was their top target all throughout this process, and that was blatantly apparent when they had brought him in for a Zoom interview, not brought him in, but they had a Zoom interview with him as what the NFL regulations and rules in this coaching search stipulate before Detroit's first playoff game. While they were on that bye week, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson were both able to meet with teams virtually. That happened with the Chicago Bears. It was an hours long, I think 3 hours long, I believe is what was reported, conversation between Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren and the whole hiring contingent in Chicago. And from everything that we heard and what was told to us, Ben Johnson got on the Zoom and said, I want this job. And he said that before they started recording, and he said it after they started recording. He was like, did I mention I want this job? This is something that he was super excited to be a part of. He really loves kind of the pieces that are already on Chicago's roster. Most importantly, obviously, Caleb Williams. He sees a lot in Caleb Williams that he can work with. He talked so much about how they're going to strip this offense down to the studs, this whole organization really, and the culture and everything down to the studs to build it back up, a la the way they did things in Detroit. But he was very, very direct in saying this offense is not going to look like Detroit's offense. This offense is going to be dictated by Caleb Williams, what he does well. Everything is going to be kind of tailored to his skill set, as well as the other pieces on the team. And then I asked him when we got a breakout session with him after he had gotten off of the podium and stuff. We were all sitting around with him, and I asked him, I was like, we've seen you get the best out of guys and kind of really evaluate and identify things that make guys special. And I use the example of Jahmyr Gibbs and just what a playmaker he is and all the different ways that he's found to use Jahmyr and how much the offense, relies on someone like that. And I'm like, I know, he's a running back. Caleb Williams is a quarterback, but what is it about Caleb Williams that you find specifically so special? And he did not hesitate. He said that the confidence with which that those tight window throws and the fact that he's confident in his abilities, not just outside the numbers, but over the middle of the field as well, him having the confidence to make those throws and being able to make those throws, he said there's already a lot to work with. But then he said to me, he was like, I know you're talking about player strengths. I'm just as much looking forward to player weaknesses and figuring out how to develop and improve those things and build the offense even around the weaknesses of players. So, as long as they can improve those things and really become kind of a well-rounded attack. I was very impressed. He said all of the right things. Obviously, this isn't the first time the Chicago Bears have brought in somebody that has made promises and has sounded and looked the part. But this time around, the Bears did do something that they just haven't historically done, which is they went out and they paid Ben Johnson. They would not give us a figure, but from everything that Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren said, especially if you're reading between the lines, that figure was by far and away the most of, someone who has never been a head coach before. And Kevin Warren used the phrase, we know that you get what you pay for. And they're expecting a lot out of Ben Johnson. So I'm very interested to see how this all transpires, but it does sound like, he's ready for it. And that was something that he wanted to do this year, whereas he said he wasn't ready last year.
I think that's a really great point that you made and that he made, talking about, okay, well, everybody likes to focus on how much higher the ceiling gets, right? Is this a Super Bowl ceiling that you're bringing as a head coach? But often the signs of great head coaches are elevating the floor of a team. When you elevate the floor of a team very quickly, I think that lets you know what caliber of a coach you have. We saw that with Jim Harbaugh this year. We saw that with Dan Quinn, who we're about to talk about, his Washington team, not only elevating the floor, but also the ceiling. But we see this with the Kansas City Chiefs right now, a team that we know has a Super Bowl ceiling. If the Kansas City Chiefs didn't have as high of a floor as they have as an organization and as a coaching staff with these players, they wouldn't have the 1 seed this year. They would have been playing on Wild Card Weekend. But it's the fact that they have such a ridiculously high floor as a team every single week that it allows them to win games that maybe they quote unquote shouldn't or didn't play their best football. And I think that that's just it's a very underrated, under talked about, underappreciated part of a great head coach is that the best ones, I'm not saying this is always the case, but often the best ones turn things around very quickly and things look different very quickly because they're good head coaches. And there's a lot of slack given to certain coaches when it comes to situations. And I'm not saying that all of it doesn't have its points. I think context is always important for any situation. But there are a lot of examples out there where you hired the right coach and you might not have won the Super Bowl your first year. You got a hell of a lot better. You get either a lot
Mhm.
closer to 500 or you were around 500 or you were a little bit above 500, right? And again, I go back to the Chargers and Commanders, two teams that hired very good head coaches that immediately elevated whatever the floor was of rosters that weren't supposed to be that good. So Chicago's
Right.
now in a situation where Chicago actually has a good roster, right? All around. Now, is it perfect quite yet? No. They're going to spend a lot of emphasis, I think, in the offensive line in particular this upcoming
Yes.
offseason when it comes to free agency and the draft. But there's a lot of talent in Chicago. And so I understand they play in a good division. This team should be significantly better next year. This should be an
Mhm.
above 500 football team. And I think that if Ben Johnson is the coach that we all believe that he's going to be, we're going to be able to see that. Sometimes it's tough when with those first time head coaches, right? I just mentioned Dan
Right.
Quinn had been a head coach before. Jim
Right.
Harbaugh
Jim
had been a
Harbaugh been a head coach.
head coach before. So that goes into it a little bit, but you
Sure.
that's what I'm going to pay attention to the most with Chicago. They're not winning a Super Bowl next year. What's the floor like with this team?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Ben Johnson was alluding to. And you dive into Ben Johnson's background, and he said it himself. He's said he's pretty low maintenance. He's not like this big ego-driven guy, but that's not to say he doesn't have the utmost confidence in himself because he really did things the hard way. I mean, he said point blank period that listen, I don't have a famous last name. I didn't play the game at a high level in the pros at least. He was a walk on at UNC at quarterback, and when they got fired from Miami, he had to start over with Detroit as a quality control coach again, and kind of take a step back and reevaluate all of that. So he every step of the way he's like, and I've failed at multiple steps and I've learned from that failure. And he's like, I'm finally at a point in my career and with the confidence in myself that I know that I'm ready for this, despite not having the head coach title before. And the biggest thing for me is going to be who he surrounds himself with. We didn't really get any clarity as to, if he is going to bring Dennis Allen with him or the offensive line coach from Detroit, who we thought there was a good chance that he was going to come with Ben, given their working relationship. But we don't know any of those questions quite yet. And I think that that's another thing that kind of determines these first-time head coaches, their success, is how much experience do they surround themselves with? How many resources do they bring in, or do they allow for, or do they ask for from the organization to really set them up for success? But it was so interesting to me because when Ben Johnson talked about coming to the Bears, he was like, I wanted to stay in the NFC North because I think this is the best division in football. And I want to go against the Detroit Lions. And he's like, and by the way, beating Matt LaFleur twice a year feels pretty good. And he knew exactly how to talk to Bears fans from that regard. And it was interesting too. I had heard from people that I had talked to inside the Lions building. So Ben Johnson took the job while he was at work that day in Allen Park. On Monday when he accepted the job. And so there was a bunch of guys that were giving him some, back and forth and whatever. And basically saying that we look forward to kicking your ass for, twice a year now. And he's like, well, I'm going to do that to you. Like, I'm going to kick your ass. And Amon-Ra St. Brown talked about it on his podcast, but I had heard it was so funny because the people I was talking to in the building were like, oh yeah, like I just passed him in the hallway and everybody's just like stopping by his office and saying it's a rivalry that was already built in, but now there's another level to it because Ben Johnson was in Detroit, but he is so motivated to beat those guys now and to really raise the floor on this team so that they are contenders in what could be the best division in football for quite some time, because none of these teams really look like they're going to drop off. We'll see what happens in Detroit with the coordinators and everything. Both coordinators now leaving. That's going to strain them a little bit, but it's still a really good football team up there. The Packers are still ascending. The Minnesota Vikings, we'll see what they are with JJ McCarthy eventually, but he said all the right things. He knew exactly how to talk to Chicago fans, and that's going to serve him well in this market.
Also, that's really cool about the culture that the Lions organization has is like, you can have these coordinators that are accepting jobs to a rival team. And it's like, hey, we don't stick our head in the sand about this. Like, I didn't feel like the Lions are sticking their head in the sand about this. This is like, oh, okay, well, now you're dead.
No, they tweeted out a picture. No, they tweeted out a picture of Ben and thanked him. They said he's been hired as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Thank you, Ben.
It's cool. I think it's cool.
It is.
The cool part about it is those two sides now don't want to win any less because of it. There's just,
Right.
I think there's more of a, you can up the competitiveness with respect or hate. Sometimes it's like, sometimes each one of them has its own fireworks that you love, but very clearly, on that side of things, on Chicago and Detroit side of things, it's we want to get the better of you because of the utmost respect that they have for one another. The other teams, the Vikings, the Packers, I know they have the utmost respect for each other, but probably a little bit of hate in there too, just because of
the Bears absolutely hate the Packers, and
that's just one of the best rivalries in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? Like
it is.
Need
it's
that.
one of the last ones really left. It really is. So yeah, I mean, the fact that he brought up Matt LaFleur and beating Matt LaFleur twice, I mean, I was like, oh, you know what you're doing. Good on you, sir. Like, well done. That's going to be clipped out, and that's going to get people fired up. So
I love it.
I love it. I do too. Again, this was the hire that was the most defensible by Chicago. This was the guy, the darling of this draft cycle. Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't ultimately work out, Chicago can say we made the best decision we possibly could have at the time.
Yep.
So
I think it's a good point too. I think it's a really good point too.
You can't really fault him if it, even if it doesn't work out. But I hope it does. I hope this is it. I hope they're really on the same page with Ryan Poles and that it all goes well because Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes work very, very well together in Detroit, despite not having worked together really prior. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping the same thing for Ben and Ryan, and it seems like that relationship is already blossoming.
And I hope that for Chicago fans, because honestly, over on the NFL Stock Exchange channel, myself and Connor Rogers, Bears fans have been a big part of our fan base because they've been very in on the draft over the last 2 years. And the point of the draft, the point of the show, and that whole channel that we have is to get better, is to make your runs to open up your winning window. And I hope that it is wide open now for Chicago because I know that is one of the most passionate fan bases that the NFL has. Let's get into these four teams that we have remaining in the NFC and AFC Championship games. Before we do that, got to shout out the product that is fueling the health revolution, and that is Cherry Bundy. If you are living an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, could be training for a marathon, could be going hard in the gym, CrossFit 5 days a week, could just be getting a brisk jog around your neighborhood, getting some steps in on a treadmill, whatever it is. If you're trying to be at peak performance, you got to check out Cherry Bundy. Natural products, no added sugars. The tart cherries have so much antioxidants in them. They help reduce soreness. It's increasing recovery. It helps you sleep a little bit better. Helps your immunity system. It's proven by so many of the top competitors in the sport as well. 500 collegiate professional sports teams use this product. Every single NFL team, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions have used this product. And it's also, it's a recovery drink. That's the one that I've had and I love. But there's also a lot of other products specifically to help you sleep, specifically to give you a little bit of energy. So go check it out. The products are available. They're over on Amazon, cherrybundy.com, but also some retailers that we have nationwide. So Publix, Kroger, those local grocery stores. Check out and see if they are there. But if not, head on over to cherrybundy.com. Check out all the different products they have. And I guarantee you're going to be able to find something that aids your active lifestyle, whatever it is you are looking to get a little bit of help with. So check all that good stuff out over at cherrybundy.com. Commanders and the Eagles, the NFC Championship game. Oh, speaking of two teams that are rivals that hate each other, they're the first game that we're talking about here on Sunday. 3 p.m. Eastern time is when this one is getting kicked off. As we do with all of these shows, we're going to give you a matchup that matters. We're going to give you the plus factor that we think is going to be a big difference maker. So this is round 3. Philadelphia Eagles won the first one when they were at home. The Washington Commanders won the second one heroically from Jaden Daniels when they were at home. This one's now in Philly. Matchup that matters, Carmen. What do we got?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the one that is probably going to matter the most, as low-hanging fruit as it is, and it's that Washington run defense against Saquon Barkley. This is what I'm sure we talked about this when we talked about these two teams meeting in the regular season, because that's what this kind of stuff comes down to. You saw in this last game just how incredibly potent Saquon Barkley can be, no matter the elements, no matter what's going on. I believe he's 148 yards short of the record that includes the postseason, the single season rushing record that includes the postseason. And he averaged 148 yards against the Commanders this season. So there's a chance he can break it. There's a chance that they're going to, I mean, there's not a chance they're going to run him. You know, they're going to run him. And especially against this Washington defense, run defense that hasn't necessarily been the best unit. 18th in EPA per carry allowed this season. And if you look at that game against the Detroit Lions, the Lions had 71 rushing yards over expectations. And you could argue that they should have run the ball more versus the Commanders. I mean, I think a lot of us were surprised just how they kind of abandoned Jahmyr Gibbs, who was averaging, he ended the game averaging 7.5 yards a carry. And despite the fact that they were down and all of that, we know how explosive Jahmyr Gibbs can be. Why the Lions kind of abandoned that mentality like halfway through the game, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you consider that this has been kind of a weakness for the Commanders defense. Jahmyr Gibbs had a career high 5 runs of 10 or more yards. So it's not just that they're giving up, rushes or yards on a per rush basis. They're also giving up explosives on the ground if you're Washington. And you look at what Saquon Barkley does best, and he's a guy that is capable of so many explosive runs. That 62-yard touchdown late in the first quarter against the Rams, 78-yard touchdown to give the Eagles the 2-possession lead in the fourth. Like, this is something that Saquon Barkley is so good at, and I don't think it's a good matchup for the Commanders defense in particular. So that's what I'm looking at. And then we're going to see, so usually when you're talking about the Eagles run game, you're not actually just talking about Saquon either. As good as he is, you're talking about Jalen Hurts factoring into that. Mm-hmm. And he did suffer that left knee injury in the third quarter of this last game. Prior to that, 71 rushing yards on 6 carries, which included that 44-yard touchdown run that he had on the game's opening drive. So he can be a factor in that. How much of a factor he's going to be with that injury remains to be seen, obviously. But even if it is Saquon that has to carry this, he's better than pretty much everybody in the league at doing it. And he's better at the yards after contact. It's not just, can you get to Saquon before he gets past the line of scrimmage? It's, can you get him down after that? Because he had 93 yards before contact in this last game. And then, which is, I guess, just the 7th time a player has generated 75 yards or more before contact. And he had over 100 yards after contact in that game. So he's getting a running start. And you can't let him do that. And that's something that the Washington Commanders have struggled with as far as missed tackles against the run, that kind of stuff. You really, really need to be sound, mind your gaps, all of that kind of stuff against the best rusher in the league.
Yeah, and it's just running the ball is, as you explained there, it's more than just Saquon Barkley. It's Philly up front. It's Jalen Hurts involved in it. But Washington has sort of struggled in this area throughout the season. Bobby Wagner's been great at it, but outside of Bobby Wagner, there's not a lot of high run defense grades throughout that team. And so first and foremost, the way that you beat the Philadelphia Eagles is you stop the run. So there's no doubt about it that if they cannot do that, you're sort of forcing the offense and Jaden Daniels to get into a little bit of a shootout. Now, that's exactly what played out last week because they couldn't stop Jahmyr Gibbs. They couldn't really stop David Montgomery, who still averaged 4 yards per carry, even though he didn't have a heavy carry load. I believe Jahmyr Gibbs, 7.5 yards per carry. Obviously, the Jameson Williams, 61 yards per carry because he had the one run for 61 yards in that touchdown. But the Lions sort of imposed their will on the ground. It was just that they then had to try to keep up with what Washington was doing in their passing game. And Jared Goff gave the ball away a couple of times. And so That's what ended up making the difference. But, if you do that against Philly's not really a team that's going to turn the ball over. They don't really do that a lot. Jalen Hurts really hasn't been put in those situations to be able to do so. He hasn't had a lot of big-time throws. I'm going to get to that in a second. But, not a lot of turnover-worthy plays either. He hasn't really been asked to put the ball in harm's way because he hasn't really been asked to push the ball deep down the field. So I agree with you. I think it's a major matchup that matters. I'll go to the other side of things. I'm going to talk about Washington's interior offensive line versus Jalen Carter specifically. That is the matchup that matters for me because Sam Cosmi, their best offensive lineman, tears his ACL last week, which just absolutely sucks. There's no way around it.
Horrible.
So Trent Scott comes in. Trent Scott's been around the league for a number of years. I think it's his 6th or 7th year in the league. 85.0 overall blocking grade on 26 snaps last week against Detroit. So good. All right. The veteran's coming in. He's doing what he needs to do. Short notice. Obviously, you never think that you're going to be out Sam Cosmi. And so he's able to come in and play that game pretty well at that spot. So there's a couple of different ways that they could mitigate this and handle this injury. One, they could just plug Scott back in again and have him play that guard spot for Cosmi. They also could, if they wanted to, slide Andrew Wiley from the tackle spot inside to guard, because they also have the veteran Cornelius Lucas, who, if they feel better about that veteran presence, and he's been an on and off starter for them this season, and he's been very, very familiar. I think this is his 4th or 5th year with Washington, so they know him very well. If they want that veteran presence here in this NFC Championship game, they could play him at tackle and move Wiley inside. So it'll be interesting to see which strategy they will go with there. But ultimately, the thing that they have to worry about is simply who matches up best against Jalen Carter, if there is such a thing. Because when Jalen Carter is playing the way that he was last week and that he has throughout this season, he's a game wrecker. 84.6 pass rush grade from Jalen Carter last week, 8 pressures by himself and 2 sacks. And a couple of those pressures, I mean, like, he's winning within half a second. I mean, the rep is already won before 1 second after the ball is snapped. And that's just how devastating this guy can be. So ultimately, that's the biggest question mark, because for as much as I think that Jaden Daniels can make up a lot of magic happen, and interior pressure is not the kiss of death for this team because of the way that Jaden can escape the pocket and who he can be as a runner, but also as a passer when he is retreating out of the pocket. Those things sort of save him in that regard. But whenever he's trying to stand in the pocket and scan the field, if Jalen Carter's going to be there within 1.5 seconds, it's hard to even think that Jaden Daniels is going to stand a chance against this. So that's a big time matchup that matters. How they're going to deal with the loss of Sam Cosmi, not just in the run game, which they also need to stay strong in the run game. It's how they're going to match up with Jalen Carter and not let him be a single player game wrecker against you. What about your plus factor here? Who do you got?
That honestly goes right into my plus factor, because, okay, if worst comes to worst, guess who scrambles the most in the NFL? It's Jaden Daniels.
Yes,
so as a quarterback, among quarterbacks, scrambles the most in the NFL. And it's coupled with it. It's not just Jaden Daniels' scramble ability that is my plus factor. It's his scramble ability on crucial downs, because he has been among the best at converting some of these 3rd down, 4th down attempts with his legs, or at least throwing on the run after scrambling. This is also one of the most aggressive teams on 4th down. So they really do make you defend all 4 downs. And that's by design. I think it's funny that, these two teams went against each other in the Lions and the Commanders last week, that the Lions, I think you would argue, were known more for going forward on 4th down, their aggressive mentality. I'm using aggressive loosely because my whole thing over the last couple of weeks has been like, do we really need to call this aggressive anymore? If you're in plus territory, short yardage on 4th down, doesn't it just make sense to go for it?
You're right.
But that's something that has really taken hold in Washington, and Dan Quinn is doing that better than anyone. Going into that game, the Commanders were converting they had an 87% success rate on 4th down. Not only that, averaging 9.9 yards per 4th down attempt, which is wild. You're basically getting a whole nother set of sticks there on 4th down. And it's because of what Jaden Daniels can do on the scramble. It's something that I just think that if you want to keep this team, on its heels, off the field, limit them, because we know that Jaden Daniels has only grown. He's only ascending. He's throwing the ball down the field really, really well, captaining this offense. He does not look like a rookie out there. Get them off the field on 3rd down, on 4th down. Make it so it's 3rd and long and it becomes 4th and long. Because in those short yardage situations, Dan Quinn has showed that he's going to go for it. And he's going to continue to go for it. That's the biggest thing, too, is you've seen in the last 2 games in the postseason with the Commanders, it hasn't worked every time. But that doesn't mean that Dan Quinn doesn't go back to it. They didn't get it on 4th and 1 early in that Bucs game, but Dan Quinn still went back and did it again and again. Same thing against the Lions. So they converted 3 of 4 4th down attempts against the Lions. And it's just, they are so incredibly, that can just break a defense's will. And I think that's your best shot at contending with Philly is trying to break the will of that defense. For as good as they are, if you can convert on fourth down over and over again, that gets to be real, real old. So I really think that can be the biggest factor for Washington to pull off this upset, is if Jaden Daniels can convert on those third and fourth downs, but do it with his legs, do it where he's not relying on the offensive line to hold his pocket, which he hasn't really been doing. Like I said, most scrambles of any quarterback in the league this year. That's something that I'm really looking forward to and seeing if he rises to that occasion, because so far, no moment has been too big for Jaden Daniels.
I agree. I nothing that we have seen yet tells us that, the clock's going to strike midnight on Jaden Daniels for this NFC Championship game. I don't think it's going to be the case. In fact, I think the opposite. I think that we might see still the best version of him with the chance to go to the Super Bowl on the line, which brings me to my plus factor in this one, which is Jalen Hurts. For as good as I think that the Eagles' run game is, as much as they are going to lean on Saquon Barkley, I believe, just like Jaden Daniels did against the Buccaneers, just like he did against the Detroit Lions, his presence and how this offense plays will push the Philadelphia Eagles out of their comfort zone a little bit. And with that, Jalen will have to make some big time throws in this game. And he has not been asked to do that and has not done that for a while. Hurts has not had a multi-big time throw game since week 10. Now, obviously, he missed a little bit of time there in concussion protocol, but since week 10, he has not had a multi-big time throw game. And the only game in which he had a big time throw was last week. Prior to that, it was 0 big time throws since week 10. He has not recorded a single game passing grade above 70 since week 9. Philly is this good. They have this good of a record, and they have the home field advantage in this game as the 2 seed in the NFC without asking their quarterback to do a lot. And Jalen Hurts really just elevates their floor. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a great short yardage option when it comes to the run game. But in this game, I truly believe he is going to be asked to throw the ball deep down the field. The situation at some point will require it. And he's got the wide receivers and he's got the weapons to be able to do it, but he hasn't done it in quite a long time. He hasn't done it multiple times in quite a long time. So to me, that's the ultimate plus factor, because I think these teams know each other well. I think Jaden's going to be very ready for this game. And I think there's going to be a point where Washington is up on the scoreboard late in the second half, and Jalen Hurts is going to be facing a 3rd and 11, a 3rd and 14, a 3rd and 9, whatever it is. And he's going to have to hit a big time throw down the field. And if he cannot do that, I genuinely think that Washington can win and go to the Super Bowl. But if Hurts does give us some of those big time throws while limiting the turnover worthy plays, I think Philly's got the better roster top to bottom. So that's why, to me, he is the ultimate plus factor, because they're going to need him. And if he shows up, I think they're going to the Super Bowl. But if he can't, you better believe that Washington's going to be right there for it. So that is my plus factor there in this game. I want to talk about Trent Baalke, actually. I want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about Jacksonville's situation.
Let's do it.
And I want to touch on this. Before we get to that, though, we've only got 2 games left. We've previewed one of them. We got one more to preview. Have you played Pick 6 by DraftKings yet? If you guys haven't, what are you doing? You're running out of time. We've only got these 2 games left. As an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players. Just choose if they will have more or less of a single stat. Could be rushing yards, could be receiving yards, could be passing touchdowns, could be sacks, whatever it is. You just pick one of those for 2 different players. And there you go. Pick 6 is available in most states: California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, so many more. And if you haven't played yet, new Pick 6 customers, you play just $5 on your first Pick 6 set. You get 50 in Pick 6 credits. We just broke down that Commanders-Eagles game. Hey, if you think Saquon's going off, if you think the run defense for Washington is just not good enough, check out what his rushing total is. That could be one of them for you. And if you think Jalen Hurts is going to hit one of those big-time throws, maybe some A.J. Green totals, some Devontae Smith totals, maybe even just some Jalen Hurts totals. Those are just some examples. You guys can check them all out. and win more cash on Pick Six. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's PFF for new customers to play $5 and get those $50 in Pick Six credits. Only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions do vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited, one per new customer. Bonuses awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire within 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. So, had a little bit of breaking news before the show went live. Want to touch on it here. Trent Baalke now out as general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, not only now are they doing a head coaching search, now they are going to have to begin a general manager search. So, the timing is probably exactly what you think it is. The Jags were rumored to be one of the front runners for Ben Johnson because of the Trevor Lawrence factor. So he was going to get to come in and get to work with Trevor Lawrence and change that franchise around. Ben Johnson ends up signing with the Chicago Bears, as we talked about at the top of the show. And then I think the big straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, Liam Cohen says, nope, I'm good. I'm going to go back to be offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I believe he is the highest paid now offensive coordinator in the NFL, and you figure that Tampa was going to have to do that in order for this to happen, but I think it also just comes down to the fact that Trent Baalke was sort of in the way. And when Trent Baalke was retained as general manager at the beginning of this head coaching search, Shad Khan said, if a head coach presents a plan where they don't want Trent Baalke as general manager, I'd be open to moving on from Trent Baalke. And I think whether or not Ben Johnson or Robert Saleh, who is also a head coach candidate, or Liam Cohen himself, whether one of those guys came out and explicitly said those words or not, the two top offensive minds that they had on their board both saying no in a situation where, again, you have Trevor Lawrence, I think spoke very loud and clear about that situation. And so now they move on from Baalke, but as if the Jags weren't a mess enough. Not that you want to keep a mistake longer than you have to, but goodness gracious, you waited all that time to fire Doug Peterson because I guess you didn't have anybody else on staff you wanted to elevate as interim head coach. So you didn't give yourself a head start when it came to starting the coaching search there because you waited all the way till the very end of the season. And now you're going to try to go through a general manager search while also being in the finalist part of hiring a head coach. The timelines are all over the place now. It's unfortunately a representation of what it feels like has been a lot of dysfunction in Jacksonville for a very long time. But your thoughts on Trent Baalke being fired as general manager and then just overall thoughts on the Jags situation as it stands?
Yeah, it's so funny because Caleb Williams showed up to Ben Johnson's press conference today in like a long leather trench, and he joked that he's felt like he's been in the Matrix for this past year, and so that's why he decided to dress like that. And I'm like,
how old is hold on. How old is Caleb? How old was he when the Matrix came out?
So I don't think he even because he said that he was Morpheus. I'm like, you wouldn't be Morpheus. You would be Neo. So I don't really know that. I think that
he was born in 2001.
Yeah.
The Matrix.
So I don't think that came out in 2000, right?
The Matrix came out. I thought it was 99. When was it? It came out in 1999. This man was negative 2 years old when this movie came out.
So
this man wasn't even a thought.
It was the throwaway comment, but I also got me thinking. I was like, are we in the Matrix? Because here the Chicago Bears just went out and paid the number one candidate in this coaching cycle. Mm-hmm. And it seems as though they're figuring their you-know-what out. And then the Jags, not that we expect much different from the Jags at this point, but the Bears are the competent organization and the Jags are now just diving further into incompetence. There's no excuse for the timelines being this off. If you were okay with getting rid of Trent Baalke for a head coach that wanted to come in there with his own GM, then you should have just gotten rid of him right off the bat.
Correct.
There are pairings that can happen. This happened. Kalen Collar actually of ESPN did a really great article just about how agents kind of pair these guys together if they don't already have a relationship or whatever. Once you hire the head coach or once you hire the general manager, it is entirely possible then to pair a willing head coach with that person or what have you. Or yeah, it gives you kind of a leg up for some of these guys who are coming in that with more experience that perhaps do have a Rolodex, like a Robert Saleh, who has been a head coach in this league and probably knows what he wants out of a GM and probably has a GM in mind. That's not to say that Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson didn't have someone that they could potentially like suggest or want to bring with them. But that's a huge ask of a guy that is coming in to be a first-time head coach also, is to be like, oh yeah, and who do you want for GM? Well, I don't know. Like I don't have that Rolodex yet. I don't have that experience yet. So it's all about kind of finding the right fit. And again, if you're open to getting rid of Baalke, then your decision is already made. And also, like, that's not any vote of confidence in Baalke, like from his perspective either. Like, I know we all made our jokes and we got the memes off and all of that other stuff while Shad Khan is sitting there talking in front of Trent Baalke about how he would fire Trent. But that doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence from his perspective either. I mean, how would you feel if you're constantly coaching for your job? And clearly he has been, or not coaching, but general managing for your job. So the whole thing reeks of not having a concrete plan. And it's hard too now because you're paying Trevor Lawrence a lot of money. That limits the ways that you can turn this roster over and what you can do on the roster in general when you don't have the cash flow that other teams would have because you have a massive quarterback contract. That contract then also comes with expectations for Trevor Lawrence. So now you've shortened the window of how soon you need results, because you now need results pretty instantaneously to justify the contract you gave Trevor Lawrence. And that's not necessarily realistic when you're talking about a total organizational overhaul. I feel so bad for Jags fans. I really, really do. Like, I keep saying that over and over again. There was no plan, because like you brought up before too, if you knew you were going to get rid of Doug Peterson week 12, why didn't you just do it? If the Chicago Bears again can fire a head coach in the middle of a season for the first time in their 104-year history, can't you do that, Jacksonville, and get a leg up? Or even if you didn't fire him, clearly, like, it didn't seem like you were already doing your homework or like coming up with a short list or all of that kind of stuff, because you didn't move like very quickly at all once once you knew the season was over. And then again, now having to look for a GM, it at this stage of the game, when you see GMs being, hired all over the place now, like John Spytek just got the job in Las Vegas. You've had other candidates that have taken jobs. You've got head coaching candidates that have taken jobs. Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson already off the board. And Mike Vrabel. Also, I'm like talking in circles because like they give me no choice.
It's extremely frustrating. I think the most frustrating part about it is it just feels to lack purpose and direction with the decisions that you make.
Intentionality. Yeah. There's
and
no
I think
intentionality behind any of this.
That's what makes this very frustrating. And I think that's what makes you nervous as a fan of these teams. It's not that changes are made. Changes are made all the time in the NFL.
Right. And that could be a good thing.
It's a razor thin margin league. And so you're going to have general managers that just don't quite work out and head coaches that don't quite work out. But what you need to have is the right vision, the right plan, and the right process when these things happen. Right. And to your point, I was laughing at this when it happened. Even outside of the awkwardness of Trent Baalke sitting right there on the Zoom and saying like, yeah, we can get rid of Trent. Even like, the awkwardness is funny there, but it's like, if your seat's that hot, just fire him. Like at that point, you're only keeping him around probably because of familiarity. Because if you go back through Shad Khan's timeline of owning the Jags, he hired Dave Caldwell from outside of the organization, gave Dave Caldwell a ton of time as the general manager. Probably, Jags fans would tell you, probably longer than he should have. And then to replace Caldwell, he put Trent Baalke in that spot, but Baalke was already there. Like
Right.
Baalke was already the director of player
And
personnel.
then he
So
still probably gave him too much.
but what I'm saying is like he hired him from within.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like you're just kind of hiring your people thing at this point in time. Are you not holding the general manager to the standard that you need to because you just don't want to fire him because you don't want to go through the process of hiring somebody? And like I want to be fully clear. I understand there's relationships here too. Like these guys are friends, coworkers. Like yeah, it's like bosses, but like they're making high level multi-million-dollar decisions together that go a long way for a billion-dollar franchise. So there is a bond, there is a friendship, there is an in the trenches part of this that goes into it. And so it's not as easy as just saying, kick him to the curb, or it rarely is that easy. But when you're sitting here and you go, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I could move on from him, you have the wrong guy. You should think that
exactly.
You should think that for any coach, for any general manager, for anybody in your front office. If you are that, I mean, I could go one way or the other. You are settling 100%. And I think that is the frustrating word that I keep coming back to with the Jags. Settling. When things were going off the rails with Doug Peterson and you knew that you were going to fire him, it felt like you settled to just lose out games with him as head coach and not get a start on your head coaching search. With Trent Baalke, it felt like keeping him around. You were settling. You are okay with the way that things have gone. And so to me, I understand why Ben Johnson didn't want to take that job, given the choices that he had. I understand why Liam Cohen didn't want to take that job, much like Ben Johnson had in previous years, knowing that he maybe only gets one crack to be a head coach and he's not going to take this one. Now, Robert Saleh's in an interesting spot because Robert Saleh might be this might be my only shot to be a head coach again to redeem myself from what I saw with the Jets. So maybe Saleh ends up being the guy and it sort of makes sense for him to take the job no matter the risk. But I do. My heart goes out to Jags fans. I hope it gets stabilized soon. It's a fun franchise. It's a fun fan base. But they got a lot of work cut out for them.
It is. It changes the math in so many ways. And the last thing I'll say is just, again, if you're Trent Baalke and say that they did retain him after having that press conference, like we thought they were going to, when you're coaching or when you're GMing for your job, when you're operating under the guys that like one little slip up is going to cost you your job, that changes the math on how you make every single decision. And now it's not so much about what's the best for the team. It's what's going to save my job, what's going to keep me safe. Right. And sometimes those are at odds with each other, is what's best for the team versus what's best for you if you're not comfortable in the position that you're in, which clearly Trent wouldn't have been, even if this continued. The whole thing is, I don't know. I hope that it gets, figured out, and this could still come out the other side for Jags fans. But I mean, getting now a general manager to having to contend with a contract that he didn't do of the size of Trevor Lawrence's, that also complicates matters too. I mean, when that's a contract you're inheriting, that's a player you're inheriting that you're going to have to pay out. That's not realistic to get rid of in any stretch of the imagination. So good luck. Good luck, Jags fans.
I agree with Mahal in the chat who's saying John Dorsey. I mean, John Dorsey was the GM of the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the GM of the Cleveland Browns. He's been in the Detroit Lions front office since 2021. Like, if you need an emergency GM, you call him up and you go, run the show. Just come in here and run the show there. Actually, no, never mind. I like Walt's idea. Walt is saying Steve Palazzolo for the general manager, and then I am the head of college scouting.
Oh, okay. Sure. Let's do that.
I'm good with that, Walt. I'm good with that. That's good with me. We can make that happen. I can still do the PFF show, right? Doug Gottlieb still coaches. Doug Gottlieb still coaches and still does the podcast. So
can I be a pro scout?
Tom Brady does the broadcast and he owns the Raiders. Why can't I be the director of college scouting?
Let me be a pro scout. Let me be a pro scout.
All right, bet. I want to do that. All right, bet. There we go. We're building out the staff. Look at this. We're building out the staff. We're going to be good to go. All right, let's get into this last game. Let's preview the AFC Championship. Bills and the Chiefs. A matchup of epic proportions. One that has just owned some of the biggest games in the NFL over the last 4 years. The record at this point regular season and playoffs is 4-4, the Bills and the Chiefs. But the 3 times that they've met in the playoffs, Chiefs have won all 3. So
yeah,
it's one of those things where you don't want to say that the games the Bills have won don't matter, because they do.
No, they do.
But it's a different beast when you get in the playoffs, especially when it's in an AFC Championship game and it's in Arrowhead. So these teams matched up when they were in November, but it was at Buffalo. Buffalo won that game 30-21. Rematch here, rematch in a lot of ways. Winner goes to the Super Bowl. Matchup that matters, Carmen. What do we got?
Yeah. So this is a little bit. All right. Here's the thing. Both of these teams are capable of winning this game. The Bills are capable of beating the Chiefs. We saw it in the regular season. Even if you look at their past 2 playoff games, if you look in 2023 and 2021, the divisional rounds, they were never more than a score apart. They're trading blows back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The Bills can contend with the Chiefs. They just need to not go into the game thinking that they can't, if that makes sense. Like, you cannot go into this game with a hangover from the last 2 times y'all have met in the postseason, or all 3 times for that matter, given that the Chiefs have won all 3 of those matchups. That's my biggest thing. And it's probably not the best for this because it's not as quantifiable, but you can't beat yourselves with like the Chiefs of it all. And thinking like, I mean, I think back to this, like the last game against the Texans, where after they lose, they come out and talk about the refs and how whatever with the Chiefs and that whole narrative. And like, I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong as far as if the Chiefs do get better calls than most and all that other stuff. But what I'm saying is, if you're entering into a game already thinking about that, or you're going to blame that for your performance, you've lost. You have absolutely lost already. You cannot make excuses. You cannot go into it thinking, well, the Chiefs are always going to get those calls. Oh, the Chiefs have beat us this many times in the postseason, yada, yada, yada. Play your game, because every single time you guys have played, it's been tough. And you have won some of those matchups, not in the postseason, but it's the mentality of everything. And it's going into Arrowhead and not letting those demons crop back up. It's Josh Allen continuing to be what we've seen of him the last half of the season in particular, but this season, where he's bucked every narrative that has been, problematic. At first he was just a gunslinger and he wasn't accurate. Well, then he got accurate. Well, now, he's still turning the ball over. Well, now he's not turning the ball over anymore. If you play your game, if Josh Allen plays as well as he's able to, if this offense is as complete as it can be, and this offensive line is as good as it has been this season, you could easily beat the Chiefs. Easily. But you can't beat yourselves with the mentality going into this and get haunted and then regress. Let that haunting kind of regress you back to the other times that you've played where there have been crucial mistakes in this, that, the other. So it's not necessarily a quantifiable matchup that matters, but it's the Bills versus their idea of the Chiefs and what that is. And are you going into that with the utmost confidence that you can go into Arrowhead and make it to the Super Bowl?
Bills are at their best when they're running the football and then when they're running it well. And I think that they will need to run the football this week to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. When you looked at the Bills' victory over the Kansas City Chiefs, that actually was not a big reason why they won. No running back averaged more than 3.6 yards per carry in that victory over Kansas City. And last week when they played the Baltimore Ravens, I think that part of what made that game so close, even given the turnovers that the Baltimore Ravens had, is the Bills were not able to have a healthy yards per carry average, specifically with James Cook, who got the lion's share of their carries. By running the ball very well, I think it fully unlocks everything that the Bills want to do on offense. It gets their tight ends more involved. It makes them more diverse in their passing game. Certainly, it does not allow the Chiefs' edge rushers and box players to tee off on them when it comes to attacking the line of scrimmage. All of that goes into account, as well as owning the time of possession in the game and keeping Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. To me, it is a pivotal part of this game. They have to run the ball much better than they did the first time that they played the Chiefs when they beat them, and they have to run the ball better than they even did last week against the Ravens, because the Ravens were the better team last week. They just happen to also turn the ball over more, and that's the backbreaking thing about why you lose football games. I saw Joe Marino said this in a group chat that I'm in. I'm not sure where he got this quote. Maybe he made it up himself because he's a smart guy, so I'd believe it. He says NFL games are lost far more than they are won. And that is what happened last week. The Baltimore Ravens lost that football game. Now, when I say that, and when I say that phrase, it does not take anything away from the team that won. They put themselves in position to be able to do it, but the Baltimore Ravens were, in many accounts, the better team last week. They just happened to lose it. Buffalo has to be a team that presents themselves with a very high floor. They have to unlock everything that they do on offense, and they have to unlock Josh Allen to his full potential. The way you do that is by leaning on an offensive line who has been one of the best offensive lines in the NFL down the stretch, even in the playoffs, and that includes how they can compete in the run game. To me, it is a pivotal part of so many different parts of why they would be able to go into Arrowhead and take down the Kansas City Chiefs. But to me, the matchup that matters is the Chiefs' run defense versus the Bills' run game. Because if the Bills run the ball well, I really do think that's their best chance to win.
Yeah, I completely agree too. And what most importantly, from what you said earlier, is that helps you control the clock, the time of possession, and it keeps Patrick Mahomes off the field, which goes into what my plus factor is, which is Josh Allen's ball security, because it has been phenomenal. Last 8 weeks, just one interception, 7 games played, one interception, no fumbles. Has not committed a turnover in the postseason. That goes back to last year, in fact. Last 4 postseason games, Josh Allen has not committed a turnover. So that needs to continue. And part of that is about how good this offensive line is and how much they are. Aaron Kromer and his staff, the Bills offensive line coach, is not afraid to add some extra guys to that offensive line. Utilize jumbo formation, 6 or more offensive linemen, 22% of their offensive snaps versus the Ravens in the divisional round. So that's something that I expect to carry over, especially when you're talking about wanting to run the ball more, control the clock more, make sure you're not committing turnovers, make sure Josh Allen is protected, because when Josh Allen isn't protected, when he is pressured, his passer rating goes down drastically. He was only pressured on 5 dropbacks against the Ravens, but he went just 2 for 5, 2 completions on those 5 attempts, 39 yards, 67.9 passer rating when pressured, versus not pressured, 109.5 rating on the season when Josh Allen is not pressured. So there is a very real thing to how much Josh Allen needs to be protected. And sometimes that can be a little bit longer than most, given how much he likes to scramble and improvise in the backfield. And then how is that going to compare to the Kansas City Chiefs, who honestly this season, pretty average as far as pressure percentage. They ranked 18th in pressure percentage this season, 32.8%. But Chris Jones, as we all know, they can move him all along the formation, all along that defensive line, tied for 12th with Nick Bosa in individual pressures this season. He's only 39th in pressure percentage, so they use him a lot to try and get that pass rush going. But if we know anything about Spags too, it's not just the defensive line that is involved in that pass rush too. He can present various looks, different things up front, and bring guys in from different levels of the defense. So that's something I'm looking at too. And then you look at a guy like George Karlaftis, who had a great game against the Texans, kind of came on 3 sacks, 8 pressures. If he is firing on all cylinders on top of Chris Jones, this is going to be a tall task for the Buffalo Bills offensive line. But like you alluded to, like I've been talking about for the last few weeks, especially, this is a very underrated unit as far as I'm concerned. I think they're one of the best offensive lines in football, and they are going to need to keep up what they've already established so that Josh Allen can keep up the ball security, the efficiency, all of that kind of stuff that goes with it, and not give extra possessions to Patrick Mahomes and that offense, and to keep the ball out of the Kansas City offense's hands.
You talked about, Chris Jones and certainly the couple of takeover players that the Chiefs have had at certain points along their defensive line to this point of the season and postseason. O'Cyrus Torrence, the interior offensive lineman for the Buffalo Bills, is my plus factor here because last week against the Baltimore Ravens, he was basically the lone weak link. And I think throughout the season, he has been somebody who has struggled with pass protection. Last week alone, 37.3 pass blocking grade, 4 pressures allowed, a 16.0 pressure percentage. The rest of the team 0 sacks allowed, and just 6 pressures allowed from Buffalo total last week. That includes O'Cyrus Torrence's 4. So the rest of the team allowed just 2 pressures while he allowed 4 himself. Steve Spagnuolo is like the Kyle Shanahan under a microscope meme. When he sees a weak link, he will attack it in full force. And if O'Cyrus Torrence plays like a weak link along the offensive line, you better believe Chris Jones is going to line up against one of his shoulders or head up against him the entire game. So to me, Torrence, it's hard to block Chris Jones, but he cannot be as bad as he was last week and as bad as he has been at times throughout the season, because as good as the Bills' offensive line is, if he is that big of a weak link in pass protection, Steve Spagnuolo is going to throw his best straight at him. So he can be a one-man savior, it feels like, or he can be a reason why this team is going to lose if they end up losing. So to me, he is the ultimate plus factor for that reason. There we go. NFC and AFC Championship games previewed here for you guys. Also got a little bit of head coaching talk, some general manager talk as well with the Chicago Bears and the Jacksonville Jaguars situation. It's an exciting time of year. We're turning the page towards draft season. The Shrine Bowl starts this weekend. Head coaches and GMs are getting hired. We still got the championship games to unfold. This is a phenomenal time.
We didn't even talk about Aaron Glenn to the Jets, did we? Good Lord.
We didn't.
We didn't. Going on.
We'll do that at some point here on this channel. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great news. It's a lot of exciting times, you know, whether you are a team that is in the playoffs or you're on the cusp of making big time changes to get better with your coaching staff, with your general managers and free agency in the draft. It's an exciting time to be a football fan, no matter what. Best way to maximize that, though, PFF sub. Go to PFF.com. Get yourself a PFF Plus subscription. We're going to be covering as good as anybody possibly can. You're going to be able to look up the numbers, the scheme tendencies, everything for all these new head coaches going to certain places. We're going to have all the article content, the video content for you. And then when free agency comes around, we're going to have the free agency preview. I am working on the draft guide, which, man, shoot, we should have 175, 200 players with full scouting reports by the time we get to the week after the Super Bowl. I mean, it's going to be earlier this year than it ever has been. So get yourself a PFF sub. You're not going to regret it. I guarantee you. For Carmen Vitali, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next time.